As our movie today starts, we see Craig, who's a doctor, and his wife Elise and their son Benjamin having a good time in their house. Elise works as a real estate agent and leaves for work and says goodbye to her son, and as she drives past their house, a pickup truck nearby appears to be spying on Benjamin. He was playing in the yard alone while Craig watches over him and joins his son for the play. Craig asks his son if he has sunscreen on as the sun was getting hotter, and Benjamin says no. Craig then gets back to the house to get the sunscreen for Benjamin, and when he opens the drawer, he finds too many cosmetic bottles that his wife left unorganized. In the process of finding the sunscreen, Craig hears and sees his son Benjamin getting kidnapped by a man while he was inside the house. He then runs out of the house and starts chasing the car, and he runs as fast as he can, but he couldn't keep up with the car's speed. He then goes back to the house and drives his car to catch up to the kidnapper, and he takes the turns that the kidnapper took, and while Craig was driving, he tries to find his phone to call the police, but he remembers that he left it back at the house. And unfortunately, the kidnapper has gone out of Craig's sight, and the traffic is crowded. Craig then gets out of his car and starts hitting people's cars' windows for a phone to call the police, and one woman gives him a phone, and he calls the cops to tell them that his kid got kidnapped. After his report, Elise returns from work and sees police cars parked outside the house. She gets inside with a worried face and hears the news about Benjamin's kidnapping. And of course, she begins to cry, and her husband Craig tries to calm her down. The scene cuts back to the kidnapper named John, who's apparently a psychopath, and after John kidnapped Benjamin, he took him to his house. While John was trying to have a silent moment, he couldn't bear the noise that Benjamin was making, calling out to his mom and dad. And John, who couldn't handle this, goes inside the room where he put Benjamin and he tries to scare him. Meanwhile, two police officers come to John's house because there was a report that there was a scream being heard from his house. John opens the door for the officers, but didn't let them see inside. One of the cops asks him about the scream that was being heard from his house, and John, with a sad face, explains to the officer that he's actually depressed. But one of the officers spots a bloodstain on the floor, making them go inside John's house. They ask him to open the door, but John repeatedly asks them for a search warrant, and while one of the officers was talking to John, the other officer looks through the window and sees a child's clothes inside of John's house. The officer then breaks the door and uses force and cuffs John. While they cuffed him, one of the officers goes to search John's house, and here we see just how creepy John's house is. It's dark and it's got a lot of odd collections. And to make matters even more creepy and weird, John has tools like drills and screwdrivers stained with blood. And as the officer was looking around, he finds Benjamin dead on a bed, and John has killed him because of the noise that Benjamin was making. And in the middle of the night, unfortunately, Elise hears about the death of her son. After hearing the news, Craig and Elise drive to the hospital to see the body of their son to confirm of whether or not it was him. On their way, both of them hope that it will not be Benjamin's body, but when they get to the hospital, they had to see and accept the fact that their son was murdered. Benjamin's funeral is held, and after the funeral, Craig and Elise were in a really bad mental state. They're pretty sad and depressed, and while they were having a conversation, it quickly escalated into a fight. They blame each other for the kidnapping of Benjamin, and Craig starts blaming Elise for her unorganized cosmetic bottle, and Craig thinks that if he didn't waste time searching for the sunscreen, Benjamin wouldn't have gotten kidnapped and he wouldn't have been dead. Craig then gets inside the house and throws the drawer inside the trash in a fit of anger. And finally, it was the dark day of the court trial, and Craig and Elise were hopeful that John faces serious jail time or possibly life in prison. And after some back and forth, the court passes a 25-year jail time for John. This makes Elise furious and asks Craig to get her gun to kill John. She's worried that John will be out of prison in 10 years' time, and Craig explains that the court needs John to confess to all the other crimes and the kids that John murdered, and he refuses to get a gun for Elise. Back at their house, Craig and Elise were having a very difficult emotional time for themselves. Their relationship got into trouble, making Elise spend time as far away from Craig as possible. After Elise leaves him, Craig had to go through a lot of pain and tries to inject himself with some kind of medicine. While he was about to do this, he sees his son's picture and decides to go get revenge. And he goes to his wife to join her on her plan to kill the killer, John. And so, the couple begin their plan. They go to the hospital to steal some kind of medicine, and Craig puts on his uniform even though he was on a break. He sneaks behind the medical staff standing beside the ambulances, and he gets into one of the ambulances and steals too many medications for their plan. After he finishes collecting his desired meds, while he was about to get out of the ambulance, his co-worker catches him, and the co-worker advises Craig about the time the court has given him to heal from the incident that happened, and Craig, to avoid suspicion as to why he's there, tells his co-worker that spending time at the house makes the pain worse than healing it. And he says this to explain why he's there, as he wanted his backstory to be believable. After this, Craig and Elise go to prison to follow the van which is going to transport John to another prison. They park their car and see John getting inside the van, and they plan to kidnap John, torture him for what he did to their son, and then kill him. They start following the van, and the van stops at a gas station, and Craig and Elise park near the van. One of the prison guards who was transporting John goes inside the supermarket to get some coffee, and Elise starts to follow the guard, and inside the supermarket, as the officer was getting his coffee ready, Craig follows them inside the supermarket and starts some drama. This grabs the officer's attention, and while the officer was distracted, Elise puts something in the guard's coffee. Their plan works and they continue following the van, and Craig was waiting for the van to pull over as he knows that the officers will be sick from the medicine that Elise put in their coffee. Suddenly, the van stops and both of the guards get out of the car and go down to a valley. At this moment, Craig takes the van and starts driving while Elise follows him from behind in her car. But a deer crossing the road gets into Craig's way, making the van crash. Craig gets out of the van fine, but John was out of the car lying on the ground with blood covering his face. After checking his vitals and realizing that he's alive, Craig and Elise take him to a house where they plan to torture him. And when they get to the house, they take him inside the basement, place him on the table, and handcuff his arm and legs. When John wakes up, Craig gives John the medicine that he stole from the ambulance as a way of torture. And Craig also gives him a painkiller to make John stay alive and awake. In the morning, Craig and Elise start cleaning the bloodstains on the truck of Elise's car. And as they were cleaning, Elise receives word from an officer about John's escape. She obviously pretends not to know and acts very surprised. The day passes, and in the middle of the night, Craig keeps hearing the voice of his son. He gets up in anger, stops the painkiller medication, and starts torturing the man by smoldering his cigarettes onto John's stomach. The next morning, Craig and Elise continue the torture, and this time it's a lot more painful for John. Elise, looking at this and hearing the pain in John's scream, changes her mind about the plan and wanted to quit. But Craig talks her down with a motive about their son. He continues the torture after making Elise agree with him, and this time he took the torture to the next level. Craig, with his knowledge about the medicine, gives John a muscle cramping medicine, and this medicine that he administered doesn't affect one muscle group but the whole body. After Craig injected the medicine into John's body, John starts to go through agonizing amounts of pain, and he starts to scream very loudly. And on another morning, Craig and Elise wake up to a car alarm and they go out to check. But when they go out, there's nobody there, and since Craig and Elise are now criminals, they have to watch out not to get caught. They go back inside the house and continue their torture, and while they were doing different things to John, they hear footsteps inside the house. A man with a gun and his dog walk into the house and meet with Elise. The dog kept barking at Elise, and the man, suspicious of what's happening inside the house, tells Elise that the house is owned by a man named Frank Joseph. Elise uses her real estate agent skills and convinces the man that the house is actually being sold, and to make things more believable, Craig comes out of the other room pretending to be a buyer. And because they played their game pretty well, the man was not suspicious and he leaves without trouble. On the other hand, the detective, who's on the hunt of the escaped prisoner, gets a phone call that the van has been found. And as soon as he received this call, the detective rushes to the crime scene. The scene cuts to Craig and Elise, and John doesn't remember who he is. He doesn't even remember anything before the car crash. Elise thinks that John is lying, but he kept telling them that he doesn't remember anything. Craig and Elise, thinking that John is lying, decide to torture him more by hurting his leg. And they kept hurting him until he said their son's name. But John really did forget and he couldn't remember anything. And Craig and Elise realized this and they felt pretty bad because they were hurting a man who didn't remember a thing. And much later that day, Elise wakes up in the middle of the night and goes to the toilet, and while she was there, John from the basement has freed himself after a bit of struggle. He's also gone upstairs, and Elise heard his footsteps and she picks up an iron pipe and hits John from the back, making him go unconscious again. After this, Craig wakes up and with the help help of Elise, they start taking John to the basement, and while they were taking him, John wakes up, pushes Craig downstairs, and he stands up and leaves the house without attacking Elise. As this was happening, the police were searching through the woods to find John, and a bit later, they catch John and detain him. Craig and Elise go out of the house to find John after he escapes out of the house, and with the help of a flashlight, they see John hanging himself just right after they get to him. And a piece of paper falls out of John's hand, and Craig picks it up and reads it, and the paper said, "Nothing I can say will ever ease the pain that I've caused you, and I fully deserve what you were about to do to me, and I am an abomination, but I'm also a coward, and on top of everything, I know I must die, but I can't take any more of the torture, I'm sorry." Turns out that Craig and Elise tortured the wrong person, and the man that they kidnapped is actually the man who committed tax fraud and not the man who murdered their son. On that day, when Craig and Elise were spying on the van at the prison gate, they didn't see the other man getting into the van because he was out of their sight. And after a deer got onto the road and the car crashed, John escaped before Craig came out of the car. Craig and Elise misidentified the man as John because he was covered in blood and had similar features as John. Apparently, John has been roaming the woods injured, and he is the reason for one of the mornings when Craig and Elise woke up to their car alarm. And the movie ends with Craig and Elise learning this, packing up their stuff and leaving the house that they were in and just driving away. If you want to watch more creepy horror movie recaps, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. We'll see you next time. Bye.